When he was aged out of the system at 18, all he and his sister were left with was a key to a rusted metal shed, sealed for 40 years. What they found inside wasn't just their inheritance, it was their salvation. If you've ever felt lost, or like the world has forgotten you, I hope this story finds you. Stick around, and if it means something to you, maybe consider subscribing. We're building a community here for people who get it. My 18th birthday wasn't celebrated with cake or presents. It was marked by the squeak of a worn-out office chair and the quiet, sympathetic gaze of my caseworker, Ms. Albright. She sat across a metal desk that had seen 1,000 kids like me come and go. The air in her office, like in every institutional building I'd ever known, smelled of industrial cleaner and faint, lingering despair. For 2 years, since our parents' accident, this had been our world. 2 years of group homes, of shared bedrooms with strangers, of counting down the days. For me, it was counting down to freedom. For my sister, Mia, who was only 14, it was just another countdown to being moved again. I was her only real family left, and the system was about to sever that tie too. "Leo, I've exhausted every option," Ms. Albright said, her voice gentle but firm, the way you speak when you're delivering a verdict. "With you being a legal adult now, and no foster placements available that can take you both, the state's obligation is fulfilled." Fulfilled. The word hung in the air, sterile and cold. It meant we were done. Finished. A file to be closed and shelved. I felt a familiar cold dread creep up my spine, the same one I'd felt standing on the side of a highway looking at the twisted metal of our parents' car. It was the feeling of the floor dropping out from under you. I glanced at Mia, who was sitting beside me, trying to make herself as small as possible. She was tracing the patterns on her worn sneakers, her dark hair falling over her face, a curtain she pulled down when the world got too heavy. My one job, the only promise I'd made to myself over their graves, was to keep her safe. And on my first day of official adulthood, I was already failing. "So that's it?" I asked, my voice tight. "We're on the street?" "No," Ms. Albright said quickly, leaning forward. "Absolutely not. I've secured you a week in a transitional housing unit. It's not much, but it's a roof. And I've been going through your parents' estate file. It was mostly debts, I'm afraid." Of course it was. Our life before the accident had been a series of close calls and just about to make it. There was never anything left over. "But," she continued, and for the first time, a sliver of something other than pity entered her expression. It was curiosity. "There was one asset. It was overlooked for years because it was considered worthless. A piece of land. It belonged to your paternal grandfather, a Samuel Thorne." The name didn't ring a bell. Our father never spoke of his family. We'd always assumed there was no one else. Ms. Albright slid a folder across the desk. It was thin, brittle with age. Inside was a folded, yellowed piece of paper, a deed, and a single, old-fashioned brass key attached to a faded tag. "The property is in your name now, Leo, as your father's next of kin. It's remote, way up in Harding County. According to the records, it's undeveloped land. The tax assessment is almost zero, which is why it was never seized to pay off debts." I stared at the key. It was heavy in my palm. A solid, real thing in a world that felt like it was dissolving around me. "And this is supposed to help us how? We can't live on a patch of dirt." "Probably not," she conceded. "But there's a note in the file. It's odd." She pulled out a smaller, more recent slip of paper, a copy of an administrative note. It read, "Property includes 1 Quonset structure. Main access reported as welded shut. Side access padlocked. Do not attempt entry. Property transferred to minor heir as is. A welded shut shed on a worthless piece of land." It was the punchline to a joke I didn't find funny. This was our inheritance, a rusty metal mystery in the middle of nowhere. "I know it's not a solution, Leo," Ms. Albright said, her professional calm finally cracking a little. She looked at me, then at Mia, and her eyes were filled with a genuine, painful empathy. "But it's something. It's the only thing you own free and clear in this world. Maybe you can sell it for a few $100s. Maybe it's nothing." She took a deep breath. "I've got you bus tickets to Harding. They'll get you as far as the crossroads. And this." She pushed a thin envelope toward me. Inside was $400 in cash. "That's from the discretionary fund. Officially, it's for travel and emergency supplies. Unofficially," she trailed off, "it was goodbye money. Severance pay from the life we'd known." I picked up the key. Mia finally looked up, her eyes wide and scared, fixed on that little piece of brass in my hand. She didn't need to say anything. Her look was a question I had no answer to. What are we going to do? I closed my hand around the key, its sharp edges digging into my skin. I didn't know what we were going to do. But for the first time in 2 years, we had a destination. We had a direction. Even if it was toward a place that didn't exist on any map that mattered. We were heading for a locked hut on a forgotten piece of land. We were going home, to a place we'd never been. The week in transitional housing passed in a blur of anxiety and hollow silence. The unit was a small, featureless box with 2 cots, a bathroom that smelled of bleach, and a window that looked out onto a brick wall. It was a holding cell between one life and the next. Every night, I'd lie awake, listening to the unfamiliar city sounds, the $400 from Ms. Albright tucked under my pillow. It felt like both a fortune and an insult, a sum of money that was supposed to launch 2 people into a new life, but was barely enough to survive a month. Mia was quiet, too quiet. She spent most of her time curled on her cot, reading a tattered paperback she'd had for years, its spine broken and pages soft as cloth. She was retreating into herself, and I felt a fresh wave of guilt with every hour that passed. I was the adult now. I was supposed to have a plan. But my only plan was a 50-year-old deed and a rusty key. I would take out the documents Miss Albright had given me and stare at them under the dim light of the bedside lamp. The deed was for 5 acres of land in a place called Sparrow Creek, Harding County. The name Samuel Thorne was written in a confident, looping script at the bottom. My grandfather, a man who was a complete blank to me. Our father, a man of secrets and unspoken sadness, had never offered a single story about his own childhood. It was as if he had sprung into existence the day he met our mother. Now, it seemed, his past was about to become our future. On our last day, I packed our few belongings into 2 worn backpacks. A couple of changes of clothes, our toothbrushes, Mia's book, and the folder containing our entire net worth, a deed, a key, and what was left of the cash after buying bus tickets and some non-perishable food. "Are you sure about this, Leo?" Mia asked, her voice small. She was standing by the door, her backpack already on, looking like a soldier about to be sent into a battle she didn't understand. "No," I said, and the honesty of it seemed to surprise us both. "I'm not sure about anything, but it's the only thing we have. It's a place. Our place." She nodded, not because she was convinced, but because she trusted me. That trust was a physical weight on my shoulders, heavier than any backpack. Ms. Albright had been right about the bus tickets. They got us to Harding, a sleepy town with a single main street that looked like it hadn't changed much since the 1970s. From there, another, smaller, rickety bus took us 20 miles further into the countryside, the roads getting narrower and more cracked with every mile. The other passengers, mostly older folks with weathered faces, glanced at us with mild curiosity before turning back to stare out the windows. We were outsiders, and it was obvious. Finally, the bus driver, a man with a kind, tired face, called out, Sparrow Creek Crossroads! That's you, kids! He pulled over at a spot marked only by a leaning, rust-streaked sign. There was no station, no shelter, just two dirt roads intersecting in a vast, empty landscape of rolling brown hills and skeletal winter trees under a heavy gray sky. "You sure this is where you want to be?" the driver asked, his brow furrowed with concern as we stepped off the bus into the biting wind. "We're meeting someone," I lied, trying to sound confident. He didn't look like he believed me, but he just nodded slowly. "All right, be safe. Next bus through here is tomorrow morning." He closed the doors with a pneumatic hiss, and the bus rumbled away, leaving us in a profound and intimidating silence. The only sound was the wind whistling through the dry grass. We were utterly alone. I pulled out the deed, on which Ms. Albright had helpfully circled the location and hand-drawn a small map. "It's this way," I said, pointing down the narrower of the two dirt roads. "Says it's about 2 miles. Mia just pulled her thin jacket tighter and nodded. We started walking. The road was more of a track, rutted and uneven. The landscape was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. The sky was immense, and the silence was broken only by our footsteps on the gravel and the cry of a distant hawk. With every step, the last vestiges of the city, of the system, of the life we knew, fell away. We were walking off the edge of the map. After what felt like an eternity, we saw it. Set back from the road, half hidden by a tangle of overgrown trees and thorny bushes, was a long, curved metal roof, the color of rust and dried blood. The Quonset hut. It was bigger than I had imagined, like a metal whale that had beached itself on this hillside decades ago and been slowly reclaimed by nature. A sagging wire fence marked the property line. There was no house, no barn, just this strange, silent structure. This was it, the sum total of our inheritance. A wave of despair washed over me, so strong it almost buckled my knees. What had I done? I had dragged my sister to the middle of nowhere on the promise of a locked shed. It was a cruel joke. "Leo?" Mia's voice was trembling, partly from the cold, partly from fear. I had to be strong for her. I took a deep breath, the cold air burning my lungs. "We're here," I said, forcing a smile. "Let's go see our new home." The gate was rusted shut, its hinges long since fused into a single piece of metal. We had to push our way through a thicket of prickly bushes at the corner of the fence, tearing our clothes and scratching our skin. The ground was uneven, covered in a thick mat of dead leaves and weeds. As we got closer, the sheer size of the Quonset became more apparent. It was at least 100 feet long, its corrugated metal walls streaked with decades of rust and grime. The main double doors at the front were, as the note had said, sealed. Not just locked, but with a thick, ugly bead of welding running all the way around the frame. It was an act of finality, a door that was never meant to be opened again. My heart sank. This wasn't a storage shed. It was a tomb. We circled the structure, our feet crunching on the dead leaves. The wind whipped around the curved walls, making a low, moaning sound. About halfway down the side, we found it, a single, standard-sized metal door, flush with the wall. It had a heavy-duty hasp and a large, ancient-looking brass padlock, green with verdigris. "This has to be it," I breathed, my heart starting to pound with a nervous energy that was part hope, part terror. I fumbled in my pocket for the key. My fingers were numb with cold, and I dropped it twice before I could get a proper grip. The key was a perfect match for the lock, its brass color a stark contrast to the padlock's green patina. I slid the key into the lock. For a moment, it wouldn't turn, seized by years of disuse. I put my other hand over it, channeling all my desperation, all my fear, all my fragile hope into that one motion, and twisted. There was a horrible grating sound, then a loud, satisfying click that echoed in the vast silence. The shackle sprang open. I pulled the heavy lock off the hasp. I looked at Mia. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the door. This was the moment of truth. Either we found a pile of junk and spent the night shivering in a field, or we found something else. I gripped the cold metal handle, took a deep breath, and pulled. The door resisted, its edges sealed by rust and time. I braced my feet and pulled again, with everything I had. With a deafening shriek of tortured metal, the door groaned open a few inches, releasing a gust of air from within. The smell hit us first. It wasn't the smell of damp and decay I expected. It was dry, clean, and strange. It smelled of old metal, sawdust, oil, and something else. Something like old paper and dried herbs. It was the smell of a place that had been perfectly preserved, a pocket of time sealed off from the world. I pushed the door open wider, and we peered into the darkness. A sliver of weak afternoon light cut through the gloom, illuminating a million dancing dust motes. The interior was vast, the curved ceiling disappearing into darkness high above us. Everything, as far as we could see, was draped in enormous white canvas dust sheets, turning the contents of the hut into a lumpy, ghostly landscape. It looked like a banquet hall for giants that had been abandoned mid-setup. "Hello?" Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. The sound was swallowed by the immense space. There was no answer but the echo. We stepped inside, and I pushed the door wider to let in more light. We stood just inside the threshold, hesitant to go further, to disturb this silent, sleeping place. I pulled out a small flashlight from my backpack, its beam cutting a sharp, nervous circle through the dark. I pointed it at the nearest shrouded shape. Slowly, I reached out and took hold of the corner of the canvas sheet. It was stiff with age, but surprisingly clean. With a deep breath, I pulled. The sheet billowed down, releasing a cloud of dust that made us both cough. Underneath was a long, heavy-duty wooden workbench. It was covered in tools, all neatly arranged. Hammers and wrenches hung on a pegboard, screwdrivers and chisels were organized in racks, and strange, complex-looking metalworking tools were clamped in vices. They were coated in a thin layer of dust, but showed no signs of rust. They had been carefully oiled and cared for before being put away. We started moving through the space, pulling off more sheets. One revealed a massive, cast-iron wood-burning stove in the center of the hut, its flue pipe rising to the ceiling. Another uncovered a simple living area, a cot with a neatly folded wool blanket, a small wooden table, and a single chair. A third sheet revealed shelves stacked with canned goods, their old-fashioned labels faded but still legible. Peaches, beans, stew, coffee. A pantry for a siege. This wasn't a shed. This wasn't a tomb. This was a workshop, a sanctuary, a home. On the main workbench, sitting right in the center, was a metal lockbox. It was an old military-style ammo can, painted dark green. It wasn't locked, just latched. My hands trembled as I undid the clasps. I lifted the heavy lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of what looked like dried lavender, was a thick stack of envelopes tied with simple twine. On top of the stack was a single, smaller key, this one made of steel, and a folded piece of paper. I picked up the paper and unfolded it. The handwriting was the same confident, looping script from the deed. It read, "To the ones who come after. If you are reading this, it means two things. First, it means I have failed. Second, it means you have survived. That is what matters most. Read the letters. Start with the one marked 1. The choice is yours. May God have mercy on you, because the world will not. St." My breath caught in my throat. This was it, the beginning of the story. I looked at Mia, her face illuminated by the beam of my flashlight. The fear was gone, replaced by a look of utter, rapt astonishment. We weren't at the end of our rope. We were at the beginning of a path that had been laid for us 40 years ago. I untied the twine. The first envelope was thick, the paper crisp, addressed simply with a large number 1. I slid my finger under the flap and began to read aloud, my voice shaking in the vast, silent, waiting space. "My name is Samuel Thorne," the letter began, and my voice echoed slightly in the huge, still hut. I held the flashlight so Mia could see the page with me, the beam trembling in my hand. "If you are my blood, if you are the child or grandchild of my son, Daniel, then this place was built for you. I am your grandfather, and I am sorry. I am sorry for the silence. I am sorry for the absence. I need you to understand that my absence was not abandonment. It was protection." I paused, the words hanging in the cold air. Our father's name was Daniel. He had never once mentioned a Samuel. "I imagine you have questions," I continued reading, the written voice of my grandfather feeling eerily present. "I will try to answer them. 40 years ago, when I sealed this door, this part of the country was a different place. It was run by shadows, by men who operated outside the law, men who believed they were the law. I was a metal worker, a fabricator. I was good at it. Too good. I took a job I shouldn't have, modifying vehicles for a local outfit run by a man named Silas Croft. I thought it was just custom work for rich clients. I was a fool. It was something else entirely. Smuggling, running contraband. By the time I realized what I was tangled in, I was in too deep. I could feel Mia press closer to my side, her fear of the dark space replaced by an intense focus on the story unfolding from the brittle page. Croft was not a man you said no to. He owned people. He owned the sheriff, the town council, everyone. I saw things that could put him and his entire organization away for life, and he knew I saw them. I tried to go to the authorities, the state police. I became an informant. It was a secret I kept from everyone, even your grandmother. They were building a case, a big one, but someone on the inside tipped Croft off. The night before the raid, my handler, a good man named Agent Miller, called me. He told me to run. He said they were coming for me, not to arrest me, but to silence me. Croft's people. Your grandmother and I, we packed a single bag. We took your father, Daniel, who was only 6 years old, and we fled in the middle of the night. We left everything behind. We changed our names. We moved from town to town, always looking over our shoulder. We told Daniel his grandparents were gone, that all our family was gone. It was a lie to keep him safe. How could we tell a little boy that his father was a marked man, that monsters were real, and they were hunting us? I had to stop reading for a moment. My own throat was tight with emotion. Our father, who we remembered as a quiet, sad man who worked long hours at a warehouse, had been a little boy on the run. The pieces of his personality, his reluctance to talk about the past, his constant low-level anxiety, suddenly clicked into a terrible, tragic focus. He wasn't just a private man. He was a man who had been taught from childhood that the past was a dangerous country. We lived a quiet life, the letter went on, but the fear never went away. Every new face was a potential threat. Every unfamiliar car on the street was a reason to panic. After your grandmother passed away, it was just me and Daniel. When he grew up and fell in love with your mother, I was terrified for them. I kept my distance, loving them from afar. I knew that the moment I stepped fully into their life, I would be putting a target on their backs. Croft's memory was long, and his reach was longer. So I stayed a ghost. A silent benefactor when I could be. A shadow they never knew was there. Before I left, before I sealed this life away, I built this place. This Quonset is more than a workshop. It is an ark. The walls are reinforced. It is fully insulated. The wood stove can heat the entire space with a few logs. There is a deep water well out back. The pump is in the rear storage closet. The generator is there too, a diesel beast that can power this whole place for a month on a full tank. There are 3 full tanks buried out by the east wall. The pantry is stocked with enough food for 2 people for a year. I stocked it and I sealed it, praying that no one in my line would ever need it. I prayed you would have a normal life, a happy life, one untouched by my failures. The fact that you are here means that prayer was not answered. It means something has happened. It means you are alone and in need of a safe harbor. This is it. This is all I can give you. A place to stand when the world tries to knock you down. I finished the last line, and the silence that followed was different. It was no longer empty. It was filled with the presence of this man, Samuel Thorne. Filled with his regret, his foresight, his desperate, enduring love. I looked around at the shrouded shapes, the neat rows of tools, the stocked pantry. This wasn't a collection of objects, it was a plan. A 40-year-old contingency plan for a disaster he had prayed would never happen. Mia was crying, silent tears tracking through the grime on her cheeks. He didn't leave them, she whispered. He was protecting them. Yeah, I said, my own voice thick. He was. The weight of our own story, the one we'd told ourselves about being the forgotten remnants of a family with no history, crumbled away, replaced by this new, more complex, and more painful truth. We weren't abandoned. We were the last link in a chain of sacrifice. I saw the second letter, marked 2. It was thinner. I picked it up. This one felt different, more practical. If you have decided to stay, it began, this is what you must know. The world outside this hut may have changed, but the principles of survival have not. First, power. The generator switch is on the main panel behind the workbench. The starter sequence is written on the panel itself. Use it sparingly. Daylight is your friend. Second, water. The well pump is electric, but there is a manual hand pump included in the kit. Learn how to use it. Water is life. Third, heat. The woods on this property are dense. I have left 3 chainsaws, sharpened and ready, and a stockpile of fuel. I have also left behind my knowledge. He went on to describe the workshop in painstaking detail. He wasn't just a fabricator. He was an artist in metal. He built custom furniture, gates, and sculptures. The letter pointed us to a set of filing cabinets in a corner we hadn't even explored yet. In those cabinets, he wrote, are all my designs, my techniques, my order books from 40 years ago, the names of clients who valued good work. Some may still be around. Some may have children who have inherited their taste. A good name, built on quality work, can outlast any man. The Thorne name meant something in this valley once. Maybe it can again. And then came the final part, the part that made my blood run cold. There is one more thing, a choice. I told you I failed. I failed to put Silas Croft away. He died of old age a decade ago, a rich and respected man. But his organization, his network, it didn't die with him. It just changed shape. It's quieter now, more legitimate on the surface, but the rot is still in the roots of this county. In the 3rd drawer of the filing cabinet, at the very back, taped to the bottom, is an envelope. It contains everything I had on Croft. Names, dates, ledger numbers. The evidence Agent Miller and I gathered. I was too afraid to use it then. I had a family to protect. You are my family. But you are also free in a way I never was. What you do with that information is up to you. You can burn it and live a quiet life here, or you can finish what I started. But know this, if you choose to fight, they will fight back. They will try to take this land, this home, from you. They will see the name Thorne and they will know. My head was spinning. This was too much. We came here looking for a roof, for a few nights of safety. And we had found a home, a history, and a war waiting to be fought. And then there was the postscript. P.S. There is also a false bottom in the large shipping crate in the northeast corner. I have left you a second choice, enough cash to disappear as I did. Enough to get a small apartment, to go to school, to start over anywhere you want. You don't have to take up my fight. You don't owe me, or this place, anything. Your survival is the only thing that matters. The choice, as always, is yours. The weight of it all pressed down on me. I felt dizzy, overwhelmed. 40 years of secrets, of fear and hope, all laid at my feet. I looked at the vast, dark space around me, at the ghostly shapes still draped in their canvas shrouds. This place was a gift, a burden, a legacy, and a trap, all at once. I felt Mia's small hand find mine in the dark. Her grip was firm. We were in this together. But what, exactly, was this? I had come here as a boy, a ward of the state, with nothing but a kid sister to protect. Now, I was the heir to a secret war, sitting on a pile of evidence and a small fortune, with the ghost of my grandfather whispering instructions from the past. The simple, desperate need for shelter had exploded into a complex moral crisis. For a long moment, I just sat there on the dusty floor, the letters in my lap, Mia's hand in mine. The beam of the flashlight was starting to dim. The silence in the Quonset was absolute. It was a space for thinking, a space for feeling the true scale of the decision before me. My whole life, I had been reactive, bounced from home to home, school to school, always just trying to get through the day, to keep Mia from getting lost in the shuffle. Decisions were made for me. Now, for the first time, I was facing a choice that was entirely my own. And it was a choice that would define not just my future, but my past. It would define what the name Thorn meant. Take the money and run. It was the sensible option, the sane option. $400 had seemed like a lifeline. The amount my grandfather was hinting at could be a new life altogether. We could go to a city where no one knew us. I could get a job. Mia could go to a real high school, have friends, have a normal life. We could escape the legacy of poverty and instability that had chased our parents, and the legacy of fear that had haunted our grandfather. We could be anonymous and safe. It was everything I had ever wanted for my sister. Or we could stay. We could stay and try to build a life out of the raw materials Samuel had left us. A life on our own terms, beholden to no one. But it would be hard. I didn't know the first thing about metalworking, or living off-grid, or fending for myself against a shadowy criminal element. And what about Mia? Was it fair to ask her to trade one form of instability for another? To chain her to this remote place, to this ghost story? And the evidence. What was I supposed to do with that? Hand it to the police? A kid with no credibility, who just inherited the property of a man who fled town 40 years ago. They'd laugh me out of the station. Or worse, what if the rot went as deep as Samuel had feared? Handing that envelope over could be a death sentence. I felt a surge of anger. At my grandfather for leaving this impossible choice. At Silas Croft for poisoning this land with his greed. At the system for chewing us up and spitting us out. At myself for being so young, so unprepared for the weight of it all. I must have been sitting there for a long time, lost in my own head, because Mia gently squeezed my hand. Leo? I looked at her. Her face was pale in the dying light of the flashlight, but her eyes were clear. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm thinking I should take the money," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "I should take you somewhere safe, somewhere normal." She was quiet for a moment, looking around the vast, dark space. She looked at the shrouded tools, the stacked shelves, the cold wood stove. "What's normal, Leo?" she asked softly. "Is it like the Hendersons' house, where we weren't allowed to touch anything? Or the shelter, where we had to lock our bags to keep our stuff from being stolen? We've never had normal. We've had places to stay. We've never had a home." She let go of my hand and stood up. She walked over to the simple cot in the living area and touched the neatly folded wool blanket. "He made this for us," she said. "He didn't know us, but he thought of us. He built a place for us to be safe." She turned back to me, and there was a strength in her gaze that I hadn't seen before. "I don't want to run anymore. I'm tired of running." Her words hit me harder than any of the revelations in the letters. She wasn't a little girl I needed to protect from the world. She was my partner in this, and she was right. Our whole lives had been a series of temporary solutions, of waiting for the next move, the next disruption. We had been treated like objects, moved from one box to another. This place, this was different. This wasn't a box. It was a foundation. Have you ever been at a crossroads so total, so absolute, that every choice feels like a different life entirely? That's where I was. Standing in the dark, in the past and the future at the same time. If you've ever had to make a choice that changed everything for you, I want to hear about it in the comments. Sometimes sharing the story of the choice is how we learn to live with it. For me, the choice was becoming clear. Running was my father's life. It was my grandfather's life. It wasn't going to be mine. I stood up and walked over to the northeast corner of the hut. It was darker here, and the air was colder. I found the shipping crate my grandfather had mentioned. It was huge, made of thick planks of wood, and stenciled with the words, "machine parts." It looked like it weighed a ton. I found the false bottom easily enough, a section of the floor that felt loose. I pried it up with a crowbar from the workbench. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were stacks and stacks of cash. Old bills, 20s and 50s and hundreds. I didn't count it, but I could tell it was a life-changing amount of money. Enough to disappear. Enough to be safe. I stared at it for a long time. It was a ticket out, an escape hatch from a life of struggle. Then I put the lid back on. I didn't take a single bill. I walked back to Mia. I went to the filing cabinets and pulled open the third drawer. I reached to the back, and my fingers brushed against a thick envelope taped to the cold metal underside. I left it there. "Okay," I said, my voice steady for the first time since we'd arrived. "Okay. We stay." A slow smile spread across Mia's face. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her in months. "Good," she said. "So what's first?" I looked at the generator panel, at the instructions written in Samuel's neat hand. "First," I said, grabbing the flashlight, "we make the darkness go away." That night was the beginning of our new life. The generator, after a few sputtering complaints, roared to life, and the Quonset was flooded with the bright, steady glow of industrial-strength fluorescent bulbs. The sudden light was almost shocking, revealing the true scale of our inheritance. The place was immense, meticulously organized, and clean beneath the layer of dust. It was a kingdom in waiting. We found the circuit for the well pump, and after a few minutes of groaning pipes, clear, cold water came gushing out of a utility sink tap. I had never tasted anything so good in my life. We made our first meal. We opened 2 cans of beef stew that were older than I was and heated them on a small electric hot plate we found in the kitchen area. We sat at the small wooden table, under the harsh but beautiful lights, and ate in silence. It was the best meal I had ever had. It was the taste of security, the taste of home. That night, we didn't sleep in the single cot. We found more blankets in a sealed trunk and made 2 beds on the floor. Before I fell asleep, I lay on my back, staring up at the high, curved ceiling, listening to the hum of the generator and the sound of Mia's steady breathing. For the first time since my parents died, I didn't feel the crushing weight of responsibility for her. I felt like we were a team. The fear was still there, a low thrum beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a new feeling, purpose. The next morning, I woke up with the sun. or rather, with the weak gray light filtering through the grimy skylights in the roof. The generator had been shut off to conserve fuel, and the silence was back, but it was a comfortable silence now. I got up and, following Samuel's instructions, got the wood stove going. It took me 3 tries and a lot of smoke, but soon, a steady, powerful heat began to push back the bone-deep chill of the hut. While Mia started the monumental task of cleaning, dusting 40 years of history off our new life, I went outside to survey our land. The 5 acres were mostly overgrown woods, thick with oak and pine. I could see the logic in my grandfather's words. There was enough firewood here to last a lifetime. I found the buried fuel tanks, their filler pipes cleverly hidden under a pile of rocks. Everything was exactly as he had said. He had thought of everything. My first real project was the door. The main, welded-shut door. If we were going to live here, to work here, we needed a real entrance. I found a powerful angle grinder on the tool wall, along with a face shield and heavy-duty gloves. The feeling of the powerful tool buzzing in my hands was intimidating, but the instructions in Samuel's second letter were clear. He even told me which grinding disc to use. It took me the entire day. The noise was deafening, and a shower of hot sparks rained down around me. It was hard, grueling, terrifying work. I was clumsy at first, but as the hours passed, I started to get a feel for the machine, for how to guide it along the thick bead of the weld. I wasn't just cutting through metal. I felt like I was cutting through the past, severing the seal on a life that had been held in suspension. Late in the afternoon, with a final groan, the last piece of the weld gave way. I pushed, and the massive door, a door that had not moved in 4 decades, swung open on surprisingly smooth hinges. My grandfather had greased them, even then, preparing for this day. Sunlight flooded into the Quonset, illuminating the space in a way the electric lights couldn't. It chased the last of the shadows from the corners and made the dust motes dance like tiny diamonds. Mia and I stood in the wide-open doorway, blinking in the bright light, looking out at our land. It was no longer a prison. It was a fortress, and we had just opened the gates on our own terms. In the weeks that followed, we fell into a routine. We were up with the sun. We'd spend the mornings cleaning, organizing, and taking inventory of our incredible inheritance. The afternoons I spent in the workshop. I started with the basics, following the exercises laid out in a series of metalworking textbooks I found on a shelf. I learned to cut, to weld, to shape. My first attempts were clumsy, ugly things, but with each one I got better. I was using my hands, creating things, not just surviving. Mia, it turned out, had a green thumb she never knew she had. She found a stash of heirloom seeds in a sealed tin and a collection of books on gardening. She cleared a patch of land near the hut and started planning a vegetable garden for the spring. She was looking to the future. One afternoon, a month after we arrived, a dusty pickup truck rumbled up our long-forgotten road. My first instinct was panic. I immediately shut off the grinder I was using, and the sudden silence felt charged with danger. Mia and I looked at each other, our eyes wide. I motioned for her to go to the back of the hut, out of sight. I stood by the open door, my heart pounding, a heavy wrench in my hand. The truck stopped, and an old man with a deeply lined face and a shock of white hair got out. He moved slowly, leaning on a cane. He looked at the open Quonset doors, at the smoke curling from the chimney, and a slow smile spread across his face. "I'll be damned," he muttered, loud enough for me to hear. He squinted at me. "You must be the boy." "Who's asking?" I said, my voice tight. "Name's Earl," he said, ignoring my hostile tone. "I own the farm over the next ridge. Been watching this place for 40 years. Made a promise to a friend that I'd keep an eye on it. Let him know if anyone ever showed up." He tapped the side of his nose. "Friend's gone now, but a promise is a promise. I saw the smoke yesterday. Figured it was time to come say hello." He looked me up and down. "You've got his eyes," he said. "Sam's. He was a good man. Stubborn as a mule, but a good man." My grip on the wrench loosened. You knew my grandfather? Knew him? Hell, son, we grew up together. He was my best friend. He sighed, a deep, weary sound. He got himself into some bad trouble, had to leave. Broke my heart, broke this whole town, what was good in it anyway. He made me promise to never try and find him, just to watch the land, and to give this to his kin if they ever came back. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, worn, leather-bound book. It was a journal. It's his, Earl said. He gave it to me the night he left, said it was for the person who came back and was brave enough to stay. I took the journal. It felt sacred. That phone call was one of the hardest I've ever made. I had to hike to the top of the ridge to get a single bar of cell service. I dialed the number Ms. Albright had given me, the one she said was for emergencies. Albright, she answered, her voice crisp and professional. Ms. Albright, it's Leo Thorne. There was a pause. Leo! My God, are you okay? Where are you? I was so worried. The professional wall was gone. I heard genuine concern in her voice. I'm okay, Ms. Albright. We're both okay. I took a deep breath, the cold mountain air filling my lungs. We're home. I told her a heavily edited version of the story. I told her the Quonset was more than a shed, that it was a livable workshop. I told her we had found a way to make it work, that we were safe and we were staying. I didn't mention the cash, or the evidence, or the name Silas Croft. I just told her we were no longer her problem to worry about. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. Leo, that's wonderful news. I'm so proud of you. Is there anything you need? Anything I can do? No, ma'am, I said, and the words felt powerful. I think we've got it from here. But thank you for the bus tickets, for the key. You gave us a chance. You did this, Leo, she said softly. You and Mia. You did this. We talked for a few more minutes. I gave her our new friend Earl's number as an emergency contact. It felt like closing a circle. When I hung up, I felt a sense of finality. The last tie to the system, to the person I used to be, was cut. But this time, it didn't feel like falling. It felt like being set free. Life settled into a new rhythm. Earl became a regular visitor. He'd bring us fresh eggs and milk from his farm, and in return, I'd fix his tractor or mend a broken gate. He told us stories about our grandfather, painting a picture of a man who was brilliant and funny and deeply moral. He taught me about the land, about the changing seasons, about how to read the weather in the clouds. He was the grandfather I never had. Through Earl, we slowly met other people from the valley. The woman who ran the general store in Harding, the volunteer fire chief, the local doctor. They were wary at first. The Thorne name, it turned out, still carried echoes of scandal and mystery. But they saw us. They saw a young man working hard, a young woman tending a garden. They saw us fixing the fence, clearing the land, bringing a dead place back to life. Respect, I learned, wasn't given, it was earned. One repaired hinge and one shared cup of coffee at a time. I spent the winter nights reading Samuel's journal. It wasn't about his fight with Croft. It was about his craft. It was filled with sketches, with notes on metallurgy, with philosophies about the integrity of a weld and the beauty of a perfectly balanced gate. It was his soul on paper. And as I read, I started to understand. The work wasn't just a job. It was a way of making sense of the world, a way of taking broken things and making them whole and strong. I started small. I repaired tools for Earl and other farmers. Then, using one of Samuel's old designs, I forged a small, elegant garden gate for Mia's expanding vegetable patch. It was the first beautiful thing I had ever made. Earl saw it and commissioned one for his wife's rose garden. Someone saw his and wanted one too. Word began to spread. The Thorn name, once associated with trouble, was starting to become associated with quality, with artistry. I was rebuilding my grandfather's reputation, one weld at a time. But the envelope in the filing cabinet was always there, a silent, heavy presence in the back of my mind. The choice I had made was not to run. But I still hadn't decided what to do about the fight. The money remained untouched in its crate, our emergency exit. I knew, sooner or later, I would have to open one of those boxes and not the other. The choice came to a head in the spring. A man in a sharp suit driving a luxury SUV came up our road. He wasn't a local. He introduced himself as Mr. Vance, a representative for a development company. He said they were buying up land in the valley for a new resort. He said they had already acquired most of the surrounding parcels. He made me an offer for our 5 acres. It was a staggering amount of money, far more than the land was worth. It was more money than was in the crate. "This is a generous, one-time offer, son," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "A chance for you and your sister to have a real life. This valley is dying. We're bringing it into the future." I knew a threat when I heard one. This was the new face of Silas Croft's organization. Legitimate, corporate, but with the same predatory instinct. They didn't want to fight me. They wanted to buy me, to erase the Thorn name from this land once and for all. I looked past him, at Mia's garden, which was now thriving with green shoots. I looked at the workshop, my workshop, with the open doors and the tools hanging neatly on the walls. I looked at the name Thorn and Company Metalworks, which I had painstakingly painted on a sign above the door using the same font from my grandfather's old letterhead. "This is a real life," I said quietly. "And this place isn't for sale." Vance's smile vanished. "You're making a mistake, kid. You're sentimental about a pile of rust. That name on the sign? Thorn? I've heard it before. It's a name associated with people who make bad decisions and then disappear. I'd hate to see history repeat itself." The threat was clear. But something had changed in me over the last year. The fear was still there, but it wasn't in charge anymore. I was standing on my own land, in a home I had rebuilt with my own hands. I was no longer a ward of the state. I was Samuel Thorne's grandson. "I think you should go," I said. He left, but I knew he'd be back. That night, I made my final choice. I didn't go for the money. I went to the filing cabinet. I took out the envelope. I called Ms. Albright, but this time, I asked for a different kind of help. I asked her if she knew a good, honest lawyer, someone who wasn't from Harding County. The story isn't over. The fight is just beginning. But for the first time in my life, I'm not just surviving. I'm building. We brought the evidence to a state prosecutor, a connection Ms. Albright helped us make. The investigation is ongoing, and it's shaking the foundations of Harding County. Mr. Vance's company is facing scrutiny, and the old rot is finally being exposed to the light. It hasn't been easy. There have been threats, veiled and not so veiled. But we're not alone. Earl and the other locals, the ones who remember what this valley was like before the poison set in, they've rallied around us. They watch our backs. We're part of a community now. The Quonset is more than a home. It's a symbol. It's headquarters for the resistance, a quiet one, fought with legal briefs and quality craftsmanship. I'm still taking orders, building gates and furniture. My work is my statement. Every strong weld, every honest transaction is a victory. Mia is planning to go to high school in Harding in the fall. She says she wants to be a lawyer. Inheritance is a funny word. I thought it meant getting something when someone dies. But I was wrong. My grandfather didn't leave me a piece of land and a hut. He left me a story I could finish. He left me the tools to rebuild not just a workshop, but a life. He left me a choice: to be a victim of my history or to become the author of my future. Home isn't a place you are given. It's a place you build, a place you defend, a place you choose every single day. The money is still in the crate. We're using it, a little at a time, to pay our legal fees. It turns out my grandfather left us the resources for both choices, to run or to fight. I'm glad we chose to fight. So many of us are told a story about who we are, by our circumstances, by the systems we pass through, by the absence of people we needed. We're told we're broken, or unlucky, or alone. But maybe, buried under all that, there's another story. A story of strength, of sacrifice, of a legacy you don't even know you're a part of. Maybe you have a sealed Quonset hut in your past, a hidden strength you haven't discovered yet. My hope for you, the reason I share this, is that you find the key, that you have the courage to turn it, and that you're brave enough to stay and see what's inside. Thank you for listening. If this story meant something to you, please subscribe and join our community. And in the comments, tell me, what does the word home mean to you? I read every one. You're not alone in this.